Hello, and thanks for joining me today. My name is Sarah Tricano, and I'm the former yearbook advisor at Holy Trinity Episcopal Academy in Melbourne, Florida. I advised the Tigrium yearbook for 11 years. I'm thrilled to be here with you today to take a look at some of the exceptional theme packages that were submitted for the Florida Scholastic Press Association Spring Digital categories for the 2020 yearbooks. And I think this is a perfect time for us to be looking at them. I know many of you are wrapping up your 2020 books and looking ahead to 2021. And I think we can take a look at some of the ways the top books in Florida for this particular category really carried their themes through in many different ways. So why don't we go ahead and get started. First, I want to ask, why should we have a theme? What's the point of having a theme for a yearbook? Anyone can create a yearbook and fill it with pictures and with text and with memories of the year, but our theme is really going to drive the angle of our coverage, the graphics and the tone and the voice of our book. It gives our book a little bit more meaning and a little bit more punch as our readers look at it. Our tone is going to come from a couple of things that we're going to look at today. You'll find it'll also give the book a little more purpose, and it allows for consistency, and most important of all, arguably, is that it really provides some additional interesting coverage opportunities for your staff to work throughout the year. As I said before, we're going to take a look at some of the ways staffs across the state of Florida really pulled through some exceptional theme development. These are some items that we are going to touch on. The first one is very strong theme statements. The second one is well-written, easy to read theme copy. The third is a great use of color to enhance and not distract from what the theme and what the content is. Our fourth item is cover appeal, and that's exactly what it sounds like, how that cover is going to impact the reader right from the beginning. We have consistency throughout the book, starting on that cover, so going back to that cover appeal. And we're also going to see theme-inspired coverage on all of the spreads and modules. So it doesn't stop on just our thematic pages, it's really going through the entire book. So let's take a look at some of the strong theme statements. What we're looking for with these theme statements is that they're clear and concise. They may be specific to the year or the school, but they may also be able to be applied to other schools. A strong theme statement is a strong theme statement no matter what. These theme statements are often supported with visual elements, but they could also stand alone. So what I'd like to do is let's start with just looking at what the theme is. And I want you guys to read it, and I'll say it out loud so you can hear it. And let's think about what we think that's going to look like in our head. If someone said that to you, what would you envision this theme would look like? This particular theme is from Hillsboro High School, and their theme was, "It be like that sometimes." Now that to me is a pretty trendy statement. It's not casual. It's not very formal, very informal, very fun. So I would expect this to have a very fun color palette and probably very interesting use of typography and that type of thing, and maybe some use of graphics. So now that you have tried to envision what it looks like in your head, let's take a look at what they had done with it. So this is their logo package that does appear on their cover. Notice that they've used very bright yellow contrasted with black and accented with red. And they've used some interesting textures to be combined. Now we will see a lot more of this book in this presentation, so you will see the connections that they made throughout. So I think on its own, this theme statement was very strong, and they really complemented it with the way they created their logo. Next, from University High School, we have "Here's What I Know." Another one, very casual, very fun, not very formal at all, and also very conversational. So again, let's think about what we think this is going to look like before we even know what it is. And they've used very casual font, some fun colors. In this particular book, they used a bunch more colors than this. This is just one of the color palettes that they had on one of their cover choices. But very, very fun, very free-flowing, and very much goes with the tone of what they're trying to say. Next we have, what's it gonna take? And even just the way you say that, it feels also very informal. By the way, many of the themes that we saw come through Florida this year, very informal, not very fancy, very casual, very conversational. That has been sort of a trend that's been taking hold actually across the country. We've seen it really gain some traction over the past, I would say, 5 years or so. So what's it gonna take? How do you see this? What colors do you see? What types of fonts do you see? How do you think that they're really gonna pull this through? And this is HB Plant High School. So they have a really nice contrast of the serif font with a lowercase script font, and then this background of what we call word salad. So all of these different textual elements competing with each other. And it really does go with this very bold statement, what's it gonna take? Okay, next we'll move on to some theme copy. Things to think about when you're writing your theme copy. You really want it to be relatable to your students. You want them to be able to read it and say, yeah, I remember that, and really relate it to their school year. That's the whole point of it. You want to drag them into the yearbook with that opening copy and get them wanting to read more and more. But you really need to relate to them. If it's too formal, if you're using words that they don't know, don't try to reach for those SAT words in this theme copy. Really keep it at your student body level and make sure they get pulled into that copy and really engaged in it. You may want to consider doing quick reads. This means you don't want to have 3 giant paragraphs of opening copy and closing copy. And if you do, try to find ways to break it up. And we're going to see some examples of that. Finally, make sure you're really bringing in specific examples from the year of your school. You can quote people, you can talk about specific events, dates, numbers. Anytime you can get specific statistics in there, you're really going to set your copy off from other books' copies. Try not to keep it general. You can have some general statements in there, but this is your chance to really set the tone of the book and make sure your student body knows you're talking about their school and this year. So let's take a look at some of the copy that did exceptionally well this year. Let's go ahead and start with the theme copy from Columbia High School. Their theme is actually, and now you know, and you'll see that right at the bottom of this copy here. They did a fabulous job at really showing some of the minute details about their school, as well as breaking up this copy visually so that it is a quick read. So let's read a little bit of it. You know us. We're the school that bleeds purple and gold. We're the school that fills Tiger Stadium with fans screaming zoo life and singing the fight song with the band. We're the class that takes heed to Mr. Hosford's words of wisdom in the morning and works together as a family and community of one. We're the generation that shows up to Zaxby's after a Friday night game and hangs out in the parking lot. These are all things that are very specific to Columbia High School. I've never been there. After reading this copy, I feel like I know the school a little bit better. They've used color and contrasting text to break up the copy so that it's a little bit of a quicker and easier read for the students to get through. They've also used some repetitive words. So you see, we're the school, we're the class, we're the generation. It has some really nice flow, and overall, they've done a really good job with this. Okay. This is Hagerty High School, and Hagerty High School's theme was no matter what. And I'll read a little bit of it and then I'll let you read the rest. But no matter what, we were going to oversleep, but instead of worrying about the hero pass, we were going to get while pushing 45 on Lockwood. Our stomachs sank when we realized we left our ID sitting on the kitchen counter. Now, does that statement, would that apply to any other school in the country? Unless any other school has a street called Lockwood that has a speed limit that's likely under 45, probably not. So very specific detail that I'm sure a lot of students can really relate to. So really, really nice way to bring it in. One other thing I want to point out here is the way they have broken up the text. So you, instead of having one large block of text, they've broken it up into about 7 smaller blocks of text. Visually, this gives the reader the illusion of reading less, and it makes it a little bit easier for us to read through it. They've also used their theme statement repeatedly throughout this. So it's really hammering home, no matter what, we do this, this, and this. No matter what, we do this, this, and this. Can any school use the theme no matter what? Sure, they can, but not every school can relate to every single item that they have pointed out in this opening copy. Here we have Robinson High School, and their theme was "They Don't Know." And if you read through this copy, once again, they've used wonderful details to really highlight their school and find things that are specific to their school and only their school. So let's read a little bit of it. We need more than meets the eye, more unpredictable, more untamed. They don't know. From the fighter jets flying across the sky during lunch to the flooding below the catwalk when it's pouring rain, there are some things they don't know about us. They don't know all the late grueling flag practices at Picnic Island. They do know the multiple state championships we hold. They didn't know the endless hours that SGA dedicates to bringing us together. They do remember the ringing of nights ×3. So notice something else that they're doing is they're using their theme, which is "they don't know," and they're twisting it around and they're saying they do know. So it's sort of contradicting itself, but it leads for a much more interesting read. And they have also broken their text up into multiple paragraphs so that it's easier on the eye and the reader really flows through it. The end of their opening, they end with "but they will." So they don't know, but they will. And then if you skip over to their closing, I love how they took these words and again, they flipped them around, and the main copy you see at the top, they didn't know. And of course they end with "now they know." So they're really closing out their book, setting that tone and giving you closure as you get to the end of it. So really great job on all of those theme copies. Okay, moving on to color use. So color is probably one of my favorite parts of the yearbook, is choosing that color palette and connecting it back to the theme and making sure everything is jiving together. So for color use, when you're choosing your colors, or the books that did this exceptionally well, chose colors that complemented the tone of their theme. They were chosen intentionally, so it wasn't just picked randomly out of a hat. And it also, you want to make sure that it enhances your message and doesn't detract from the message. So if you're choosing really bright and vibrant colors, you want to make sure you're doing that on purpose and that there's a reason for it. It's not just because, hey, I really like this color. And you certainly don't want to choose a color because it's the Pantone color of the year. You really want to make sure that there is rhyme and reason behind choosing them. So let's take a look at some of these examples. So Haggerty High School, again, their theme was "no matter what." Their color choices were somewhat muted with this bright blue, and I think it goes very well with the theme. And you can see how they carried it throughout some of their thematic pages by using some of this toning on their images and using these COB images on top of that tonal blue color in the background. So really nice use of color here, and very, very tame and very controlled use of color. Next, we have Hillsboro High School, and it'd be like that sometimes. Remember, we talked about them already. They have this very bright, vibrant color palette that really does go with their bright and vibrant theme. So I was expecting it to be very bright and vibrant, and they did just that. What's interesting is that on their cover, they had a white background and pops of red and yellow and black on top of it. And as you opened the book on that end sheet, it was black. So that very good use of color as far as contrasting from the cover into the end sheets. You can see that within their spreads, everything was very consistent. So using that yellow and the red and the black, very nice use of color here. Finally, back to University High School. And like I said in the beginning, they had 3 different cover choices. And you wouldn't always think to pair a pink, a green, and an orange. But the way that they've done this and pulled this subtle color palette is very nice. And no matter what cover the reader got, inside the book connected back to the cover, because it was this very I don't want to say pastel. It's not quite pastel. It's like muted jewel tones almost between the pink and the turquoise and orange. And of course, we're looking at digital versions of this, so I'd be interested to see this book in person and really see it in my hands and see how that color turned out. I can tell in the spreads, the colors that they chose never really they worked really well with all of their images, let's say that. And it even and they use some spot color inside of their book, so you can see on that first spread on the bottom left, that is some spot color. It's not one of the theme colors that is shown on the cover, as well as the red in the middle. They're using that spot color, but they're using that same almost desaturated look to apply it throughout the book. Okay, so that cover appeal that we talked about in the beginning. So the cover is arguably the most important design element of your entire book. It's where you set the tone and the voice of your book. It's the first thing that people are going to see. Let's be honest, they're going to open the yearbook no matter what. They bought the yearbook, they paid for it, they want to look inside of it, they want to see their friends, they want to see pictures of themselves, but it really is the most important part. So you want to draw them in, you want to set the tone, you want to say this is what you should be expecting inside the book, and it should match throughout, it should be consistent. So we want to use graphics and colors that connect to our theme statement, and we want to see those things come throughout the book. We're going to start with just looking at the covers. So first, again, we have Hagerty High School, and you saw a piece of this on the color screen, but they are using some strong graphic elements, some lines. We can see a dot used on the period and also next to Fusion 2020 in the bottom right-hand corner. And also notice that we have some layered text happening with the outline on top of the solid color. So a very interesting typography package and nice contrast with everything. Next, we have HB Plant with their cover for What's It Gonna Take. A very nice use of color. We didn't cover them on the color slides, but very nice use of color on their cover. Very dynamic cover with the layered text and the contrasting typography. We get a really good idea of what this book is going to look like on the inside. So very nice job here. And then we have Hillsboro High School with their very bright and vibrant cover to go with It Be Like That Sometimes. A lot of graphics happening on here, a lot of contrast, a lot of different textures. We have this plus graphic, we have a angled line graphic, we have a combination of 3 squares on the lower left-hand corner, all contrasting with each other with the red plus sign on top. It really does feel like it goes with the tone of what the theme is, and I really know what to expect when I open this book. We have Columbia High School. Columbia High School also had a choice of 3 different covers. Similar to University High School, their color palettes are very different. We have a blue, purple, orange, yellow, green, turquoise going on, and they all work very well together because they really are in the same color family. This is a good time to talk about gradients possibly, because anyone who knows me knows that I am not a big fan of gradients, but when they are used well, they are used well. And this is a case, Columbia High School used their gradients really well, and we'll see a little more of it later. Robinson High School, they don't know. So they also had 4 different covers. They had a yellow, a pink, a blue, and a green. So these colors are also very similar in nature as far as tone, so they work really well together. Throughout the book, they do use all 4 of these colors. They are not introducing all 4 colors on the cover at the same time, and that's okay. because as soon as you get into that book, you're seeing all those colors, and it really does work. What's nice about this is a very dark background of the black contrasting with the white no, and then the swash of color behind the no to really highlight it. So they're really highlighting that word no, and I suspect that they're going to use that throughout their book in their coverage and in their modules. Here's University High School. Here's what I know. Same thing as Columbia and Robinson with the different cover options. Like I said before, their 3 colors that they use were very complementary of each other, and you can tell that they go together as a set. Their cover has some of that same text layering that we saw in HB Plant, but used in a very different way. There's some subtle details on this cover that are just really very beautiful. And I don't know if you'll be able to see it on your end, but I can see it especially on the orange version. They've applied this sort of distressed look to that cover. Okay, our next topic is consistency. And with consistency, we're looking for things like graphics and colors and typography. We want to see these things repeated throughout the book. Typically, they're going to start on the cover, and we're going to see them come into the end sheets, into the title page, and then throughout the spreads. So once again, graphics, colors, also the tone of voice. So your headline should match the tone of voice of your theme. Your typography should be used in the same manner. So if you're using a specific font on your cover, I would expect it to be inside of your book. And if you're using a certain type of typography effect, I would expect that to be in the book as well. The interesting thing about this is you could be subtle with this, but you could also be obvious. And the best way to do it is kind of a mixture of both. So you want to have things that are obviously connected to what you've done on your cover and to your theme, but it's also nice every once in a while to have kind of a subtle hint to what your theme was without actually throwing it in the reader's face. Because if every page had exactly the same thing on it and was like in your face, theme related, it loses its touch a little bit. Hopefully we'll see it in folios and headlines and in photo treatments, and we'll show you some examples of that. So the first one we'll look at is HB Plant with what's it gonna take. And what I've done for you here is I've kind of put everything up on the screen at once so that you can see how they all look like a set. When you are looking through a book, no matter what page you flip to, you should know that that's the book that you are looking at. There shouldn't be any question. You can see it in the color, you can see it in the typography. The font that they chose for Gunna on the cover is a very, very specific font that you can see is used throughout the book. And we have some examples here of their thematic pages as well as spread pages. And we'll go through some of them. And then I've also given them to you in larger version so that we can take a little bit of a closer look. So again, they're using that same combination of fonts that we saw on the cover. So that nice blocky serif font in all caps, along with the script font in lowercase. A lot of times I think staffs forget about that minute detail of whether they've chosen to use a font in uppercase or lowercase or sentence case. It makes a big difference. If all of a sudden in this book we were to see that scripty font used with an uppercase letter or in all uppercase, it would totally throw off the jibe of the book. So make sure you're keeping all of that in mind. And here is their opening spread. This is also their opening. They have multiple pages of opening, so they have additional opportunity for lots of great coverage on their thematic pages. And here's a spread. Notice their folios. They've combined, again, both fonts and that layering effect. You see in their headlines, they've included that layering effect. Some other subtle things that they've done with consistency. It takes skill. So you can see just using that word, what's it gonna take? They use that word take very subtly in their module headline. So same thing, so a very different spread they've used. So this spread has a white background. This spread has a nice vibrant red background that's pulled from one of their theme colors. And then this is their closing, and they ended with what did it take? So remember what we talked about, it's always nice to kind of flip those words around when you're closing it out on when you're ending your book with your closing. Kind of gives it some nice contradiction. Okay, Robinson High School with their consistency. We looked at their cover already. They had 4 different color choices on their cover. And then as soon as you open up that end sheet, you can see all 4 of those colors integrated right into that end sheet. So even though that cover doesn't have all 4 colors there, it's right there. Some other consistency things we're seeing here, right from the cover to the end sheet, the very graphic circles and highlights that are happening there, and those little arrows, they're very directly related to that swash of color that's happening behind the word no on their cover. You see that logo repeated on the title page. You see those graphic elements repeated on their opening pages. On their dividers, they've taken that the idea of a big word and put it behind their behind the pictures and the text on their divider page. They've also done that on a regular spread page. You can see in the middle bottom there. And then finally you have your closing there. So really nice consistent use of color. Using this gray background was a consistent thing throughout the book, but also being able to use a white background and combining those all together to create a cohesive look. And we'll take a closer look at some of these spreads here. So that translucency behind the word no with the yellow, taken from the cover and then also used really throughout the entire book, was a really nice touch. But not always using it the same way. So if you notice on the opening, they had that swash of color behind this caption for this photo, but on here, they used it as an element behind the football player there. So it's not always used exactly the same, and that's what I'm talking about with subtle. Find different ways to use your elements to keep your book interesting. Think about each page as an opportunity to utilize those same graphic elements and typography elements in a slightly different way. Here's another example in the bottom left-hand corner on that pull quote. They've used that blue to highlight that pull quote there, that blue swash of color behind it. All right, Hillsboro High School with their consistency. Their cover started very vibrant, very casual, very fun text. One of the things that they did that is very hard to pull off is stacked text. So if you look at it, it'd be like that sometimes. The word sometimes on the cover is stacked, so it doesn't read straight across. So it does force you to read a single word going down. That can be very hard to read at times, and they did a pretty good job in utilizing it in places where it was very legible and didn't interfere with the readability of it. So we already talked about going from the white cover with the bold graphics on top to a black end sheet, which was pretty powerful. In addition to that stacked text, they used some staggered text. And I think that the fact that they had so many different types of stacked and staggered text really lent itself to this theme and lent itself to its consistency, because they really diversified it. It wasn't, they didn't really, I don't want to say they didn't try to be consistent with it, but they were really willing to go out on a limb and try lots of different typography things. And I think it really paid off because it feels very cohesive because they did that. And that doesn't always work that way. So let's take a closer look at some of their pages. So on the title page, you'll see kind of the first little instinct of these hand-drawn elements, which I think really added to their theme. Although it wasn't on their cover, I think that's okay, because sometimes you want to leave a little bit for the inside of the book. You don't want to lay it all out there. So in this case, you know, I was glad that they left it here, and you start to see those little hand-drawn details in the trumpet with the music notes and coming around the trumpet player, and some of these swashes coming behind the people on the left-hand side. Consistency wise, the colors consistent throughout the entire book. We can also see these hand-drawn graphic elements brought in really nicely. They've done some spot color with that punch of red, which was really nice. And we can see that stacked text on here as well. Some hand-drawn elements. They've added a signature in the bottom right-hand side, which I thought was a nice touch. A subtle detail we see here is that vertical line of or vertical box of slanted lines here. We did see that on the cover. It's not on every page, and that's okay. Notice that the stacked text is also not on every page, and neither is the staggered text. That's a good thing. This happens to be a very busy page, lots of photos happening on it, lots of action, lots of color. Had they added the staggered text on this page, it may have been just too much. Okay, so let's take a look at some theme-inspired coverage. This is probably one of the harder things to pull off with your theme and pulling your theme throughout your entire book. It's not easy to do this type of thing. It's hard, but in the end, it's really worth it. You can do this by spending some time when you are brainstorming your theme and coming up with words that go with your theme and phrases. And really, if you invested a couple hours at the forefront of your design development at the beginning of the year, it really facilitates this for your staff members throughout the year. So we're looking for things like headlines, content inspiration, use of graphics and color all throughout the pages. And we've seen some of that already in the consistency slides, so we'll review that a little bit. So this is from Robinson High School. And I chose this spread because their theme, if you remember, was "They Don't Know." And this headline says "They Don't H2 Know." So very cute way to add that in to their coverage. Not too hard to do, you know, just an extra thought that went into the design of this particular headline on this spread. Also here, they have terms to know up at the top. So I thought that was pretty cute. And so this is for what's it gonna take. Here, you know, their main headline, "Going Viral" with the apostrophe. Instead of "going viral," they went with "going viral." To me, that speaks to their theme because their theme has that kind of slangy sound to it as well. So that's why this one is in here. And then this one on their bottom left-hand module there, it takes skill. So what's it gonna take? It takes skill. So these are things that your average reader may not pick up on right away. And that's okay, because not everything you do is gonna be very obvious and apparent to them. And they don't know that what they're looking at has been so thought through, but subconsciously they will realize it. So taking a little bit of extra time when you're going through your headlines and your sub-headlines will really help. So this one, "And Now You Know." So this is Columbia High School, and they did a really good job at taking their theme and pushing it through with coverage. So they had a lot of profiles throughout their book that really showcased getting to know the people at their school. So they would write these stories and, well, hey, now you know about this person. Now we know about Sawyer, or his last name is Sawyer, so I think it's Ethan Sawyer. So now you know him. Same thing here with this content spread, "Behind the Mask." So ideas for coverage, they really wanted to show people who they were. So now you know all of these people. I thought that they did a really good job with their coverage and tying that back to their theme. Hillsboro High School again. So again, with the very informal tone of voice with their headlines and subheadlines, and also with their graphics. We've talked about them. See how they have that yellow hash mark on the right-hand side and the plus sign. Sometimes there are setbacks. It'd be like that sometimes. I just think that it goes really well together. It doesn't just automatically happen like that. These are kids who really tried to figure out a way for their headlines and subheadlines to match what they were saying in their themes. Same thing with "We Stay Serving" till the very last spike. Everything is very thought through and really tied back to their theme. So now that we've finished going through some of the exceptional things that the Florida schools who entered this category did to receive their All Florida honors, I'm just going to take a couple minutes and go through some theme best practices. A lot of these items are things that you might choose one or two things to focus on for the year and take some good theme development and really make it great. Just know that you don't have to take every single one of these things. Pick one or two, focus on them, discuss it with your staff, spend some time on it to really take your theme development to the next level. So I'm really quickly gonna breeze through these. If you wanna dive into them a little more, please download the presentation and review it with your entire staff. So some of the things that you should consider when you're developing your theme is your font choices, your typography. Remember, typography is a little different than fonts. Fonts is the actual font that you're using, whereas typography is the way you are using that font. So a combination of different fonts using bold or italic or underline or an outline or even different types of color that you can apply. How are you going to display your theme statement in a logo form? So how are you using that typography and color and graphic packages to really display your theme? How are you going to use photo applications? We saw in the Hillsboro High School how they used some spot color as well as some hand-drawn elements laid over top. We saw in Haggerty High School they used some COBs with tonal backgrounds over top of their images. Think about your spacing and how your theme might dictate what that spacing should be. Does your theme lend itself for a more open and airy type grid system, or is it leaning towards a more packed and busy type of spread? Those are things that you really should consider. Also consider all of the coverage opportunities that will open up depending upon your theme. If your theme is too specific, sometimes you might be limiting yourself. Think about the ways you can use the different words in that theme that you're developing and how it can apply to the coverage that you are creating inside of your book. We've already talked about color a lot, but just remember that your color is used to create moods and feelings. It can enhance or support your photos and design. Those color combinations, they can be masculine, feminine, trendy, classic, soft, cheerful, relaxing, collegiate, anything that you can dream of, you can use colors to create that mood. Please allow your theme to dictate that tone and build a color palette that will match it. And just some more questions to ask your staff as you're diving into these colors, and a couple of resources for you to use. Love using Cooler. It allows you to, it's an interactive tool to create these awesome palettes. You can download and save your CMYK values to be able to use those with your printer. And then also Color Lovers has user uploaded and generated palettes, a really good way to gain inspiration. So if there's one color you really wanted to use, you could go, head over to Color Lovers and do a search, and it'll give you all of the color palettes that people have used with that color. And you can use CMYK values, you can use RGB values, and then you could also use color names or Pantones. Places that you should really see your theme on all of your thematic pages, starting on the cover. You're going to want to see it on your end sheets, both front end sheets and back end sheets. And these are just some details that you're going to want to go over with your staff. You'll see it on your title page. You'll see it on your opening, your dividers, your closing. And you really want to try to extend the theme to the rest of your book. You don't want it to just end on the cover. If you've never had a theme, then a great first start is the cover. If you've had a theme on the cover but never really tried to bring it into the rest of the book, start with the end sheets and then maybe add an opening spread and see how it goes from there. We talked about having some coverage opportunities on your content spreads. A really easy way to do that is to, like I said, spend some time at the beginning of the year when you're developing your theme and create a list and brainstorm that list and list every single possible phrase or word or idea that comes to mind when you think of your theme, and then share that list with the rest of the staff. Post it in the room. Anytime someone is struggling coming up with a headline, which I know is often, or a subheadline or a package title, tell them to go to that list and look at those words and see if they can't pull something that would tie back to that theme coverage. I hope that going through all of these beautiful theme packages that were submitted by our Florida schools and going over some of these tips were really helpful to you. I'm looking forward to seeing your 2021 books, and I wish you the best of luck as you get started on that brainstorming and development. See you guys soon.